Hello.
Royce White here.
Oh, hello. How are you?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
Good, good, good.
Who am
Is
I?
it
Who am
okay
I
if
speaking with?
Fernando, I'm a reporter from USA Today.
Oh, okay. USA Today.
Yeah,
This should be fun.
thank you for giving me some of your time today. I'll try not to take a lot of it. But before I start, is it okay for me to record this just so I can write down exactly what you say when I write the article?
Of course. How much of it you gonna put in the article?
Could you say it again?
I said, of course. How much of it are you gonna put in the article?
It depends. The reason that I was calling
I'm kidding.
you
I'm kidding.
is,
I'm kidding. I know how it works. I'm just messing around.
No, you're good. No worries.
Okay.
Yeah. So the reason that I reached out to you guys at the campaign is there was an article from Heartland Signal about a tweet that you had about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you had any comments in response to it, just to explain your remarks or maybe clarify or anything in general.
Well, yeah. I mean, I got a lot of comments about it. It's primarily what I talk about all the time on my podcast, and it's what I talk about when I go and speak during this campaign, during that campaign back in 2022. It's been central to the entire message of my time as a voice in politics. So, I mean, what question do you have?
Well, the tweet itself, it says, that the bad guys won in World War II. Could you maybe clarify, what do you mean by that statement?
Well, I think the bad guys did win in World War II. I think World War II was a great tragedy. Obviously, we lost 70 million plus people in 6 years. Ended with the dropping of an atomic bomb, which still has great moral question in my eyes and in many historians' eyes as well, on both sides of the aisle. And when in the second part of the tweet where I say that you can see the link between communism and liberalism and the Allied forces, that's just a categorical fact, because we were allied with Russia, which then we were a predominantly liberal society, and Russia was obviously under the leadership, dictatorship of Stalin, and there's a communist regime to boot. So, I mean, I think that's just a categorical fact that you can see the link between liberalism and communism and the Allied forces. But when I say the bad guys, I mean that the post-World War II democratic liberal order has been the prevailing ideology, political ideology around the world since World War II. And although World War II was a great tragedy, a great human tragedy, the victors, the benefactors of World War II are the beneficiaries of that post-World War II democratic liberal order. And it's also a categorical fact that the post-World War II democratic liberal order has led to global governing institutions who don't share America's, or at least they don't uphold America's foundational values and beliefs. And it is the, let's say, it was the springboard to the modern day military industrial complex. And not to say that we didn't have a military industrial complex before, but after World War II and with the inception of some of these global institutions, the military industrial complex has certainly gotten much bigger and much more powerful and much more corrupt also. So, when I said the bad guys, I meant the beneficiaries of the post-World War II democratic liberal order. And I say that they won the war because in general, there really are no winners or losers in wars. Certainly not the soldiers that fight in them and die in them. But particularly in World War II, you have a situation where the entire world comes together on one side or the other under the auspice of certain values and beliefs. Yet, as soon as the war is over, those alliances turn to those allies turn to foes. And you can see that expressly with the Allied forces. I mean, as soon as World War II was over, almost immediately we recasted many Nazis into the Eastern Bloc during Operation Paperclip to run spy and counterintelligence on the Russians, who we turned our attention to. So, I mean, to say that the Allied forces was some fundamental building block of modern society is just not historically honest. We never, and that's understandable. I'm not saying it as a, I'm not saying that's the corruption. I'm just saying that it's a historical fact. We had very, very different beliefs than the Russians did at that time in terms of our ideology, them being communists and us being more liberal. And right after the war, you see that. You see, we beat the Axis powers. Obviously, the Russians gave much more of their blood and their their national treasure than we did, losing some 18 to 20 million Russians in order to stop the Germans. But nevertheless, we ended up starting a war with them immediately after. So, and I say that to reiterate, the soldiers who fight in wars usually aren't the winners or losers on either side. Most times wars are fought for the purpose of other people, and those people, in this case, have maintained power up until now, to this very day. And yes, they are corrupt. And even more importantly, what I was saying is those benefactors that basically were responsible for the institutions that sprang out after World War II, they don't reflect America's foundational values. In fact, those global institutions all but openly sort of disavow fundamental American values. I mean, when you hear Klaus Schwab, for example, and by the way, Klaus Schwab's dad was a Swiss arms manufacturer that actually helped the Nazis in World War II, or made arms for the Nazis through the Swiss state. When you hear him say that libertarianism is a sort of counter system ideology that basically throws sands in the gears, you're hearing a rejection of a lot of America's foundational values, like freedom of speech. And there just happens to be a very big political propaganda right now that rejects certain fundamental tenets about freedom of speech. And so, I mean, I don't know what else to say about that. I think it says it all. Another thing that you could point to is like, the entire lie of the post-World War II democratic liberal order was that we were going to take freedom and democracy around the world, and we were going to bring people, peace through strength, and we were going to make them self-determining. Well, one of the first things we would have done to truly try and make nations self-determining is give them America's constitutional understanding of how essential the right to bear arms really is, not only as a sort of individual right and protection, but also as a nation from foreign invaders. And it has, to this day, the Second Amendment is one of the great home field advantages that America has. Anybody who tells you differently is lying. If you ask any leader how difficult they think it would be to make landfall, defeat the standing American army, and then occupy and hold American territory, that'll give you your answer about how important the Second Amendment is. So we didn't do that. I mean, name me one nation. Can you think of one nation that we stood up after World War II, that we went into and gave them a constitutional understanding of America's foundation, an understanding of America's foundational values and beliefs, our constitutional rights, and emphasize that they have the Second Amendment? Name me one nation that has a Second Amendment, concretized in their country today since World War II.
Mm-hmm. I haven't studied on that, so I can't name one to you right now. But I do have a follow-up question. You mentioned, the benefactors that benefited during World War II and after World War II. Yeah. Is there a specific group of people or a specific group that you consider the benefactors? Like, you mentioned this kind of nameless or faceless group. Is there like a specific group that benefited, or is it just kind of like a vibe?
Is it kind of like a vibe?
Or like, not a vibe, sorry, that was the wrong word, but like, is it just kind of like a group?
Yeah, no, there's a group. It's the post-World War II democratic liberal order. It's not just a group or a specific group. It's a global group. It's the prevailing political ideology of our entire global economy. And some people who participate in it, you could say, are benefactors. Maybe if that's it, maybe they view themselves as the benefactors. I don't. I say that it's a bastardization of individual freedom, will, and an idea of national citizenship. But they may look at themselves as being the benefactor. I tell you what, the longshoremen there on the longshoremen there certainly haven't benefited. They regard the fourth industrial revolution and automation, which is a byproduct of the post-World War II democratic liberal order, as fundamentally detrimental, I would say, right? So much so they're willing to go on strike. And they're not the only ones. So there are people out there all around the world who view themselves as benefactors. I would say it's a lack of understanding, a lack of perspective. But if I was going to say that the group of people who actually believe in the ideology, I would refer to them as globalists, and they're from all walks of life. And they can talk about peace, and they can talk about human welfare. They can talk about the poor. They can talk about black people or racism and white supremacy. But they're warmongers. They're warmongers, and they've erected a system, a global system and culture that is predicated on death and debt. And it's not predicated on basic human well-being and prosperity. And that was the lie. So I think they may benefit in that business model, in that system, but the vast majority of us live under the tyranny of it. We live under the injustice of it.
Mm-hmm. And just one last follow-up question.
I just wondered. I'm asking this question to everybody who calls me. I just wondered: does the mainstream media, like USA Today, does the mainstream media regard the term military industrial complex as being conspiratorial? Is that considered a conspiracy theory in most circles in the mainstream media? Like at USA Today, if you went down to the break room, I don't know if you guys still have break rooms or if they bring, if Uber Eats brings the vegan options to the right to your desk, but do they still regard the term military industrial complex as being a valid term? Would you regard that as being a valid term?
Look, I wish I got the Uber Eats deals. I work from home all day, but I just have one more follow-up question.
No, wait. I'm asking. Wait a second. I'm asking. Do you regard the term military industrial complex as a valid political term?
Look, I was just calling to get calling, and I just have one more question. If you could answer it for me, I don't know if you could.
Okay. Yeah, no, I can answer for sure.
Oh, so the statement again. The reason I called was you said the bad guys were in World War II. There's a lot of people online and in various circles in politics in Minnesota that interpret it as you saying that the wrong side won in World War II. Is that a fair assessment of what you're saying, or is it a bit of a mischaracterization?
That the wrong side won World War II?
Yeah, I've seen some people say that's kind of what they got from your tweet, is that you're saying that the wrong side won in World War II.
Well, yeah, I would say that's a mischaracterization. I said what I said. I said the bad guys won in World War II, and they did win. Now, if people interpret that as me saying that that the Allied forces defeating the Axis powers, makes them the bad guys in the equation, then that's just stupid. I mean, that's obviously not what I was saying. And if anybody listens to my podcast or goes to my campaign website or brings up or references anything that I say on a daily basis, then they know exactly what I'm talking about. But that's not what we do today in our culture. That's part of that's part of what has erected and spilled out after World War II. It's how we deal with basic information. So no, I don't think there was a right side or wrong side. I think there was a world war, and it's very difficult to understand the multitude of factors that lead up to a world war. Something we should think about right now, because we're on the verge of another one, it would appear. But there are a lot of things that lead up to a world war especially, in terms of individual nations and who was right and who was wrong, and what markers are we using in history to define who owns what land and who has a right to what. All of those things are very difficult, and those are arguments and debates that have raged on since time immemorial. But what I can say definitively is that neither the Allied forces or the Axis powers won or lost the war. There was a group of people who benefited from all the institutions that sprang up after World War II, and they continue to benefit to this day. And mostly, they continue to benefit unchecked, unfettered, because nobody can even go back and, the whole World War II event is kind of the bedrock of how modern politics and our society are structured. So you can't even go back and, as is the example in this situation, when I say something like that, people, think that it's controversial. It is controversial because that's the norm. The norm is you can't question how the history of World War II took place, or how it played out, or how it lives on to today. It's just assumed that we should all accept it. And has it worked? I'll ask you, has it worked? Has the post-World War II democratic liberal order been a success or a failure? See, this is what's strange to me. You got all these liberal, it's so odd. I just can't make heads or tails of it sometimes. You got all these social science departments, all these liberal universities, political science, departments, and so on and so forth. You got all these people who claim that white supremacy has been a plague on the entire planet, and that Western arrogance has overstepped its bounds and stuck its nose where it shouldn't have, and participated in a sort of our culture is the truth and yours is a myth around the world, predominantly against black people or people of melanated skin, anywhere on the planet. And yet the post-World War II democratic liberal order is the most successful political, the most successful political movement in maybe in world history. And it was erected, it was constructed, and it has been led by Western nations this entire time. So I'm confused. Is the remaining stronghold of the post-World War II democratic liberal order not a byproduct of the same white supremacy that all of these liberal left activists criticize? Or are they just talking about Republicans?
Mm-hmm.
I'm asking. That's a question.
I'm 22. I don't know all these things.
So wait a minute. You mean to tell me? Let me see if I'm getting this right now. So now we're getting down to what's really going on here. Okay. You mean to tell me I'm running for United States Senate? There's a tweet that Heartland Signal, which is a predominantly liberal, if not far left progressive institution or publication, they made a statement about some tweet that I made, and they assigned, in USA Today, one of the biggest newspapers of record, assigned a 22-year-old to ask me a question about World War II. Don't you think it would be more appropriate to find find somebody who was, at least at least up and working a job when some of these things were actually being discussed or taking place? I mean, even me at 32, I really shouldn't have a good reference of this history. I just happen to be a unicorn, you know what I mean? But don't you think it'd make more sense if they got somebody who was like 50 to ask me a question about World War II? Are you supposed to write this? Are you supposed to write this story for the USA Today?
Yes, I'm a trained journalist. I looked for the stories myself, and look, I asked you if you had any comments on the tweet, and I don't know if you have anything else to add about the comments that I was asking.
No, I'm asking you. I did ask you. I did make an extra comment. I'm asking you. Do you think it's how are you going to do a story about a United States Senate candidate regarding comments on World War II if you don't have a basic understanding of World War II?
Thank you so much for giving me some time, and have a good weekend.
Okay, Godspeed to you, brother.
All right. Mm-hmm. Bye-bye.
Hello, is this Newsweek? Hello?
Yeah, this is Jesus.
Is this Newsweek?
Sí, yes.
I was told to call about a story My name is Royce White.
Oh.
I'm running for United States Senate.
What is it?
Say it again.
Yeah, this is Jesus. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Nice to talk to you. So who are you? Who are you? Excuse me, couldn't hear.
My name is Royce White. I was given this number by a reporter from Newsweek that wanted to ask a question about a tweet that I made.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Royce. How are you? Yeah, we are writing the story, and we wanted to see what is happening right now with that. After the tweet resurfaced, and we wanted to have your perspective on your opinion because we want to be fair.
Okay. Well, what's the question?
Well, the question is, what are your thoughts about this? Because, you know that.
I'm sorry. I can barely understand what you're saying. What's the question?
No, the question is what comments do you have about these old tweets resurfacing again? About what you said. What are your thoughts? Because there is a lot of criticism about that specific tweet, and we only wanted to hear what.
There's a lot of criticism about the tweet. What's the criticism?
Well, the criticism is that people think that, as you said, that the U.S. and the Allies were the bad guys in the World War II. So people were.
That's not what the tweet says. That's not what the tweet says. The tweet says that the bad guys won World War II, and that you can see a link between liberalism and communism the same way. You can see a link between liberalism and communism when you look at the Allied forces. That's a categorical fact because America was a predominantly liberal society by our definition, and we were allied with the Russians, who were predominantly communist. They were under Stalin. So it's just a categorical fact that there was a link between. It's a categorical fact that there was a link between liberalism and communism in the Allied forces. But me saying the bad guys won World War II had nothing to do with the Axis powers or the Allied forces at all. It actually has to do with what sprang out of World War II. And if you really think about the victors or losers of wars, they're very rarely the soldiers that fought in the war on either side. We see that here in America, soldiers that come home from wars that we presumably won aren't necessarily the victors of those wars. After the fact, certainly their lives don't tend to reflect that they won a great victory, and the same is true for soldiers on the losing side of any war. So soldiers are rarely the ones who win or lose wars. So to try and paint it out like any of that comment or that post was regarding my feelings about the soldiers who lost their lives is completely ridiculous. In fact, I think most soldiers of most wars, after having served in those wars, start to develop an understanding that just maybe they were sent to fight wars for something that wasn't necessarily communicated to them properly. And I think that is the case. And I think it was the case in World War II. I think if you take a look at the institutions that sprang up out of World War II, one, the longstanding conflict that we've now entered ourselves into with the Russians since that time period don't reflect an allied forces, do they? I mean, would you say that the relationship between ourselves and Russia today, or even immediately after World War II, during the Cold War, reflects some great alliance between us and the Soviets?
Yeah.
No, I'm asking you. Would you say that would you say that the soldiers who went to fight in that war under the banner of the Allied forces can still say that there's an alliance between us and the Russians that reflected what we would consider victory today, or even shortly after the war?
No, obviously not. I think that the relationship between Russia and the U.S. was right now but you can see it's not.
Right. It's a broken relationship, right? But it's not just now. I mean, we went into the Cold War almost immediately after the World War. So again, those soldiers who fought under the banner of the Allied forces came together for a strategic military reason, only to then turn around and be cast right back into a geopolitical conflict with what was previously their allies. I mean, that's just a categorical fact. I don't understand the criticism. There must be people who don't understand the history, or they're trying to fleece some audience about what the real history is. Because
So I think, yeah, I think it also relates very well. In a Twitter post, you kind of like explain all of these things. You know, like it is a small space to explain, like try to explain what is the bad guys look like, right? So when you read the tweet and when people read the tweet, well, people might say, oh, he's talking about us. He's talking about, well, I don't know, the Allies, France, England, whatever.
No. I am talking about us. No, I am talking about us. I'm not saying that I'm not talking about us. And when I say the bad guys, again, what I'm saying is, although we defeated the Axis powers, the Allied forces was never a real alliance to begin with because there were such deep ideological differences. We turned around and entered a war with the same people that we had just fought beside. So that's one element of it. But the other element of it is the people who benefited from the win in World War II were people who seek global governance, and the global institutions that sprang out of that war have undermined the very ideas with which America went into that war. We went into that war with the idea of freedom and justice and democracy, you could say, and freedom of speech and freedom of assembly and all of the things that we believe in here in this country. However, the global institutions that sprang out of that war openly, publicly, and adamantly disavow the things that we went into the war to fight. And that's a categorical fact as well. Like the Second Amendment, for example. The Second Amendment is a fundamental American law, right, and value. And the people, and for example, I want to be very clear about this. For example, when we went around the world and said we were going to use freedom and democracy to make all these nations self-determining, we were lying to them. And that was a part of the post-World War II democratic liberal order. We were lying straight to these countries' face. And we were doing it as as a sort of as a manipulation. And we used the dollar as a manipulation. We used economic incentives as a manipulation to be able to fleece that lie to the entire world. And we promoted it. It was propaganda. We promoted it as we were trying to give all these countries a democracy and freedom and make them self-determining. If you want to make a nation self-determining, the way America is self-determining, then you would have tried to facilitate giving these other countries America's constitutional values and rights. But they didn't do that. Name me one nation around the world that we went to help stand up after World War II that has a fundamental understanding or implementation of the Second Amendment and right to bear arms. It doesn't exist. The reason why is we didn't want those nations to actually be self-determining. It's something that we just said. We wanted them to be welfare nations, and that's exactly what they are today. And because that's what they are, we run the risk of going into multiple wars in perpetuity in order to uphold the world's security. And what it really does is it hurts the American working class and middle class. But not only that, it actually hurts their nations as well. Look at Ukraine. We could have brokered a peace with Ukraine well before. This war didn't start in 2022. We've been in a conflict with Russia since the day World War II ended. And anybody who knows the history understands that. People who write headlines that dismiss that history or overlook that history, they should be ashamed of themselves. They are shaming the memory of our military men and women and the people who served this country. They're shaming what happened there in World War II when they write cheap headlines that don't acknowledge the real history. The day World War II was over, we turned our focus to the Soviet Union and we entered into a Cold War. And look at the result today. 1 million Ukrainians have already died. And there's still no talk of peace, except through Donald Trump. So I don't want to hear about there's criticism of a tweet. And anybody who has a real criticism of it that wants to sit down and talk about the real history, I'm here all day. I'm here all day. But see, you media people, you don't want to do that. I don't know what you guys get paid to do anymore. Honestly, it's embarrassing. And I know the Democrats and even some milquetoast Republicans will use it as a way to discredit me, but none of them will actually sit down in a public setting, recorded on the record, and talk about the issues of the history. Because the history is ironclad. It's not even arguable. I could see if I was presenting history that was arguable, it's not even arguable. There's nothing to refute. Do you hear something do you hear something that you can that's refutable in what I just said about the history?
No. I think that it's very clear. What you have said, and just finish your call. If you have like we want to read really clear. Adding your comment and your perspective. So, on this particular comment, when you're referring to the bad guys, I just want to be really specific.
When I'm referring to the bad guys, what I'm saying is there were a group of people that benefited from World War II that had nothing to do with the ideas or the values that we said we went into World War II to fight for. And those people who benefited in that way were, in most cases, not people who actually fought in those wars, but people who probably funded those wars and people who gained political power or prominence from those wars, especially at an institutional level, especially on an institutional level. So when I'm talking about bad guys, I'm talking about what would become the United Nations. Yeah, and I'm not the first one to criticize the United Nations, am I? And I'm not the first one to criticize the International Monetary Fund or the World Bank, and the crony capitalism that was American and then spread to the entire global economy after World War II. Yeah, crony capitalists, globalists, corrupt, lifelong career politicians. Yeah, they won World War II, and sometimes when you have great tragedy, it becomes the springboard for incredible corruption and tyranny. And none of the values and none of what's being done now in today in America reflects what we said we went to fight in World War II against. None of it.
Thank you, Mr. White. I appreciate that you took the time to speak with me and read back. So this is what we wanted. We wanted to be fair and have your perspective and your opinion. We didn't want to publish before talking to you, so we really appreciate it.
Okay, well, and I appreciate that. I appreciate the call, and I want to ask because I'm just curious. Do people in the media still believe in such a thing as a military-industrial complex?
I don't know. We cannot have an opinion about it, to be honest.
Okay. Well, if you believe, okay. Well, if it's even commonly accepted to say that there's such a thing as a military-industrial complex, that military-industrial complex categorically grew and became more powerful after World War II. So I guess you could also answer in short by saying the military-industrial complex won after World War II. And they are the bad guys, for sure.
Thank you, Mr. White. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good one.